All right, we are back with another lesson, another state test prep video. Today we're talking about standard 7.G.4. Okay. Fourth geometry standard, mostly about circles. Let's jump right in. Question 1. A circle has a diameter of 7.2 inches. What is the circumference of the circle rounded to the nearest tenth of an inch? So let's talk about circles. Okay. Circles, that's a terrible circle, have two things you can tell about it. It has the circumference, which is essentially how far it is around the circle, kind of like the perimeter of the circle. You find that by taking the diameter of the circle and multiplying it by this wonderful number called pi. Get ready to hear about pi. You're going to hear about pi a lot on the rest of your mathematical career. Pi is a Greek letter. It stands in for a number, specifically 3.141592, yada, yada, yada. It's a very long number that never ends. It's what's called an irrational number. And you have the area of the circle, which is found by doing pi times radius squared. Okay? So you may ask, what's the difference between a diameter and a radius? Well, a radius represents how far of a line you can make from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. Because the circle is perfectly round and not like the really bad circle that I drew here, the radius will always be equal whether you draw it like this, draw it here, draw it here, draw it here. It represents the distance from the center of the circle to the edge of the circle. The diameter represents the distance of a straight line from one edge of the circle to the other that passes through the middle. So realistically, what that means is that the diameter is equal to 2 times the radius. You take 2 radii, you put them together, that's your diameter. Okay? All this is to say that if you want to find the circumference of a circle, you need to take the diameter, which they give you, of 7.2 inches. And you need to multiply it by pi. Let's talk about how to do that in this calculator that you will be using on the state test. So our diameter is 7.2. And then to put in pi, you're going to hit Shift up here in the top left. And you're going to hit the EXP button right here. That is pi. And it will put in pi. And then you just hit equals. 22.619. Okay. 22.619. Then you need to round it to the nearest tenth. Remember where your tenth place is, okay? If you have your ones, you have your tens, you have the decimal point, you have the tenths, and the hundredths, okay? We're rounding to the nearest tenth. So the first number after the decimal point. This number will either go up or down based off the number to its right. Whoops. If the number to its right is 5 or above, it goes up. If it is less than 5, it goes down. Okay? In this case, the number to the right is 1, which is less than 5, so it's going to round down. So we're going to cut it off at 22.6 inches. There's wonderful things called mnemonic devices out there to help us remember things. And the mnemonic device I've always used for circumference and area is cherry pie is delicious. Whoops, that's not how you spell delicious. apple pies are 2. Cherry pies delicious. Apple pies are 2. That's how I remember the circumference and area formula. All right. So let's go to question number 2. Circle is shown. What is the circumference of the circle to the nearest tenth of a centimeter? This right here is the picture definition of a diameter. So your diameter would be 10. So your circumference, cherry pie delicious, is C equals pi times 10. So I'll put this in the calculator. Same thing, shift exp for pi times 10. You get 31.4159, 31.415. We're rounding it to the nearest tenth. So this number will go up or down based on this number. This number is again a 1, which is less than 5, so it's going to round down to 31.4 centimeters. All right. Question 3. The circumference of a circle is 18.84 inches. So now we're given the circumference. What is the diameter to the nearest inch? So the nearest whole number. So we're again working with cherry pie delicious. And now we are given 18.84 equals pi times d. So now we have to figure out what d is. We have to figure out the diameter. Okay? To do this, we have to get rid of pi. Using our standard equation solving rules, how does one get rid of pi? Well, if you remember when we were going over equations and expressions, you think of it like a party. And here's the door. You try to kick people out. You try to push them out the door. To push them out the door, you need them to do the opposite of what they are doing. Okay? The opposite of what they are doing. So this pi is being multiplied by d. So instead of multiplying, you're going to divide both sides by pi, because what you do to one side, you're going to do to the other. So if we do 18.84 divided by shift exp pi, you get 5.996. 5.996 equals D. Out of intrigue. No, okay. So now we're going to the nearest inch, the nearest whole number. So this is going to round up or down based off the number next to it. This is a 9. So it's going to round up to 6. You're going to put 6 inches. All righty. Question number 4. Which expression represents the area of a circle with a radius of 7 units? Okay. So, remember that we talked about area. Area, where we had cherry pie is delicious, we had apple pie R2. Okay, so this tests that you know what an exponent is. And for some reason, what an exponent is difficult to people to remember. An exponent represents how many times you multiply a number by itself. Okay, so your r squared is equal to r times r. The exponent is 2, so there are 2 r's. Okay? So if the radius is 7, that means that your area would be pi times 7 squared. Do we see that immediately over here? No. However, what we do see is if you break 7 squared down into 7 times 7, that means we're left with a equals pi times 7 times 7. Do we see that? We do. In choice B is our answer. All right, we go to question 5. We go to question 5. For the spring 2021 OST, calculator allowed. The radius of a circle is 20 centimeters. What is the circumference in centimeters of the circle? This is a trick question, and this is why you need to read the questions. Because it says the radius of a circle. To find the circumference, you need to use the diameter. Cherry pie, delicious. So you first have to convert this radius to a diameter. How do you do that? You double it. The diameter is just 2 times the radius. So the diameter is 2 times 20. So the diameter is 40. So now that you know this, now you can find the circumference equals pi times 40. And we're becoming experts at putting this in. We go shift exp parentheses 40 125.663, and we're again rounding to the nearest tenth, 125.66, which means that this 6 is going to round either up or down based off of this number next to it. 6 is 5 or more, so this will round up to 125.7. Question 6. I'm flying through these questions kind of quickly, and that's because a lot of these questions are essentially the same thing, with just 1 or 2 words changed. It's very repetitive, this standard. The circumference of a circle is 50.24 centimeters. What is the radius rounded to the nearest tenth of a centimeter of the circle? So again, the circumference is pi times diameter. Cherry pie delicious. We know circumference is 50.24 equals pi times diameter. How did we do this last time? We divided each side by pi. So you get 50.24 divided by pi. And you get 15.99. So you get 15.99. Whoops, let me move the camera down. All right, write this over here. Now, here's the problem. What is the question asking? What is the radius? Again, the circumference works with diameter. Okay, so if you can be given a radius and you can double it to find the diameter, then conversely, the opposite of that would be if you're given a diameter, you can divide by 2 to find the radius. So let's take our diameter that we found, 15.99, and we'll just divide it by 2. And that gives you 7.995. Now, this needs to be rounded to the nearest tenth. So this will either round up or down based off of this. This is a 9, so this is going to round up. That's going to push that up to 0, which will push this up to 8.0 centimeters. That's the big thing, though. If they give you a circumference and they ask you to find the radius, after you find it, after you solve the equation, you have to have it, because if D equals 2R, then R equals 1/2 D. Okay, you have to make sure that you do that, otherwise you will not come to the right answer. All right. Question 7. Spring 2023 OST. Which statement describes how to use the circumference of a circle to find its area? Okay, so now they're saying if we give you the circumference, find the area. So circumference is pi times diameter. Area is pi radius squared. So, if they give me this, that means they've given me the diameter. I can find the diameter, right? So I can I apologize, I'm re-looking at the choices here. So if they give me this, I can find the diameter if I really wanted to, right? Or, here's what I can do. If I know that this equals pi times D, I know that D equals 2R. If they give me the circumference, then not only do I have pi times diameter, I have pi times 2 times the radius. Whoops. So where can I go from here? Well, I can now divide both sides by 2. So I have the circumference divided by 2 equals pi times the radius. So now what do I need? Well, in the last problem, we talked about how we need to multiply by the radius. So if you have this, we need to have the radius squared. And radius squared means radius times radius. So what you can then do is multiply by the radius. And that gives you pi times radius, which is radius squared. So you need to divide the circumference by 2, okay, and then multiply by the radius. This is one of those questions that is difficult for me to explain, and that's not to say it's inexplainable, because it's not. It's just one of those ones that I, as a teacher, as a person, as Mr. Dietz, have trouble explaining this one, so I apologize for that if you didn't get it on this one. I can try to break it down another way for you another time. But for now, we have to keep moving. Question 8. A circle has a diameter of 12 units. What is the circumference in units of the circle? So, circumference, cherry, pie, delicious. Okay. The diameter is 12. So we're going to put in 12 for our diameter. 12 times pi. Wow, look at that. It's already done. We're experts at this by now. All right. Last one for this section. A park has a square garden and a circular garden. This is from last year's OST. The perimeter of the square garden is equal to the circumference of the circular garden. The area of the square garden is 36 square feet. What is the best approximation of the difference between the areas of the two gardens? Good heavens. Good heavens, this question. All right, well, let's think about what we know. The perimeter of the garden is equal to the circumference of the circular garden. The area of the square garden is 36 square feet. Okay, so this leaves us with two options. Well, it leaves us with a couple options. How do you get to 36? The square garden, actually, it only leaves us with one option because it's a square. So for something to be a square, that means all of its sides have to be equal, correct? All sides have to be equal. So, what times itself gets 36? 1 times 1 is 1. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. 4 times 4 is 16. 5 times 5 is 25. 6 times 6 is 36. Ding, 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 ding. 6 times 6 is 36. So we know that the perimeter, one of the side lengths is 6, which means that the perimeter would be the sum of all the side lengths, or 6 plus 6 plus 6 plus 6, which is 24. So we found the perimeter. So now we know that the circumference is 24. So what can we do with that? Well, if the circumference is 24, we can now plug it into Cherry Pie Delicious. So 24 equals pi times diameter. Divide both sides by pi, as we've done in previous problems. 24 divided by pi, 24 divided by pi is 7.63. So let's just say 7.63 equals the diameter. We now need to use that to find the area. So now we have to have that 7.63 divided by 2. This is a very tough question. There's a lot going on. But stay focused. 3.815. That's your radius. Actually, I skipped a step. I made this more complicated than it needed to be. But then multiply by the radius, so 3.815. Whoops. And then multiply by pi. Whoops. Oh my God, Brian, you're a mess. And you get 45.72. Equals the area. So what's the difference? Roughly 10 square feet. I hope that's something above me, not thunder. All right. So that's going to do it for this video. I'll be back with another video soon. If you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Thank you so much.